Today's episode, we'll be talking about the 5 elements of how to thrive in your relationships. As we continue July's theme of mapping greatness, there's nowhere to go but up, and I don't want you guys to miss out. So check out the description on whatever platform you're tuning in to stay connected. And while you're at it, don't forget to make this your favorite podcast by subscribing and sharing. There's always room up here. And with that, welcome to Cloud Thrive. How many times do we get in the thick of having conversations around achieving goals and not leaving things on the back burner? Here's another one. So, I know for me, I postponed and I kept procrastinating and putting it off, and everything else was more important than just doing it and getting it out of the way and really just being great. Let me tell you something. Anchor removed all of those excuses and read me completely, because when I decided I'm going to do my podcast, Anchor was there for me for a number of reasons, but for the biggest reason, it was free. After that, everything was there. Like, all the tools were there. I was able to record what I needed. I could edit what I needed. I could get it out. It distributed everything. I thought I was going to have to sit there and reach out to Apple and reach out to Spotify and figure out all of the other podcast platforms. There are, first of all, too many to name. However, I didn't need to do that because Anchor did it for me. On top of that, there is no minimum listenership for you to earn money from your podcast. So, again, everybody can succeed, but your route to getting there is your own. However, Anchor is going to make it easier if creating the podcast is the thing to do, and that's on your list to achieve. So, stop playing, get on Anchor. I encourage it. Thanks. I'm DaiJuan, life coach and your host, and thank you for joining me on Cloud Thrive. As we continue to rise to greatness and achieve great things, let's make sure that we continue to be real, stay on target, push through with a clear mind, always willing to rethink the possible, but most of all, let's thrive. So the goal today is to go over the 5 most vital components of maintaining and improving a thriving relationship. The 5 components of a thriving relationship are the actual components. What make up a relationship? How do we continue the momentum and the growth of that relationship? How do we keep connected? What are those connectors? What are the strengths and weaknesses? And how do we build upon those? How do we really leverage who has what? And how do we support one another? And ultimately, how do we thrive in that relationship? How do we keep it moving forward? How do we make sure that we're growing, not with just ourselves, but with our partner, our friends, our family, those around us that we care most about? What I'd like to share, life happens, so we all go through this. There's not one person who is not faced with this challenge in a relationship structure today, but there has to be a bit of work put in. It's not effortless. However, with being more vigilant, we notice that there's less resistance in the relationship. So what I'll do as we start to kind of work through these, I'll start to discuss where we are now and where we'd like to see ourselves. And this really comes in the air of a few emails that I've gotten from you guys that have really talked about wanting to strengthen the relationships with your friends and your families, of course, during this national health crisis. And it has really taken a strain on us as a whole. Along with that, it's also in light of where our country is moving toward in addressing a lot of the inequality and injustices around minority communities. It's not just the Black community, but there are a lot of minority communities who are also being recognized during this time. So the relationships that you have, it really takes a listening ear. It really takes vigilance and patience. to really understand what they're saying, not just to hear what you want to hear, but to hear what they're actually saying verbally and non-verbally. So I want to jump right in and start talking about these five elements, these very vital elements of really getting to that thriving relationship with those around you. So the first one we're going to touch on are the components of that relationship. So what makes a relationship? And this could be, you know, how do you define it? I would share it's really, how do you define a relationship? What does that look like? And how do we, everyone classifies it differently. It could be, I believe this person is my significant other. I believe this person is um, my cousin. I believe this person is my brother. I believe this person is close to me. Maybe sometimes it's not as easily defined as you think it is, but this is a great opportunity for you to really determine what the relationship you're working on improving is. What does that relationship look like? And as we begin to plan forward, what would you like that relationship to look like? Would you like to have time together? Would you like to have a space where you two have the opportunity to grow? Is there a shared vision among you two, or three, or group? And so that really discusses the characteristics in that first space. The second part to this is really the pathway toward improvement. And this is where we start talking about that vision again. And I know it's really a trend in a lot of what I speak to you guys about, but what is a vision forward for you and this person? One, and then two, is it a shared vision? Is it a shared vision? If you guys don't really share the same vision, it's really hard, or there's more of a challenge to address where you two may be able to find common ground. Now, it's okay to have different interests, to have a different space or different background, to live different experiences. However, what's bringing you two together is truly important for what you guys will do moving forward. And so think about where you are now. What does your conversations look like when you need to compromise? What does each other's triggers look like? And are there patterns to it? Do you guys have, and I know other more romantic conversations, if this is what you need to hear this for, what's your love language? And is your partner able to engage you in that way? If it's platonic or if this is familial, we want to be able to look at how you guys communicate. What does that communication look like for you two? And then start going back, or not going back, but moving forward, start planning forward. What do you want it to look like moving forward? Have you guys put in place a few strategies? And do you accommodate, or do you kind of become passive? What are some of those points that you realize, okay, no, this is really where I am in this relationship and this is where I'd like to be. And that's really important in that space. So there are a number of things that we could really talk about when we look at pathways toward improving in any type of relationship. And that's going to be very important. The next part of this is going to be connecting with one another. And look at where you are now. And I'm not a fan of using clingy as a word, but people who are oftentimes more close, they like to be physically next to you. They like to be very dependent on having someone near them oftentimes. And when they don't have that, it's almost as though there are these areas of withdrawal for them. How do you respond to that? And it's good to begin this space of identifying how they are able to connect or how you're able to connect. This may stem back to the love language. This may go back to how well you guys communicate outside of that love language, if it's more platonic. But this is also a great space for us to really just discuss um, where your identity is in this relationship and where their identity is in this relationship. And that's extremely important. The next part of this is going to be us going into our strengths and weaknesses. And this is oftentimes where working with clients, I get a lot of hands-on work done because we really have to take time in this. We often, and I have to include myself here, we feel like we can take on the world. And it's not that we can't, but we also have issues sometimes with, or we're challenged with asking for help. And when we're challenged with asking for help, what oftentimes happens is that we end up in this space of throwing off our balance with our capacity. So we don't really define how we fit into our relationships with our friends and our family. What makes sense for you makes sense in this space. Look at your strengths and be honest about your weaknesses. I'm going to say that one more time. Identify your strengths, but be honest about your weaknesses to your partners and to your friends and to your families. Because what would happen at that point is if you can truly and honestly identify where your weaknesses are and be able to clearly articulate or communicate what you don't have and what you need, then that's where the support comes in. And you have the opportunity to really ask, hey, I need help in this space. I'm not so good here. Or how can I learn? What would you recommend? Build on one another. Or however the dynamic works in whatever relationship structure we're discussing or that you need, I apologize for that. This is a great opportunity for it. So talk about those strengths and those weaknesses. It could very well be a conversation along the lines of, this is what I'm good at. However, I'm challenged in this area. Can you support me? And if neither one of you can, then that's a great opportunity for communicating how you both will move forward to find what you don't have. Because now you both have identified what you don't know. Now you know what you don't know. And the next piece of this I love is really growth. It's really going to be thriving in your relationship because now we're talking about maintaining a lot of where you see yourself and where you'd like to be. And so the lessons that you've learned after you've identified and defined what a relationship is, after you've taken the time to really plan forward what you'd like your relationship to be, after you've had the opportunity to really define how you connect with one another, how you experience the dynamic in your relationship, whether it's platonic or not, and how you really are able to identify where you are strong and where maybe someone else can support you. Now, how do we maintain that? Or how do we create a place or playing field where you're secure in knowing that you're well supported, that you are able to clearly communicate without the back and forth. So, going back to, where I started, Anybody can create a great relationship, I believe, if the effort is there. This is not an effortless uh, group project. I'm going to say everybody is able to identify the components of a thriving relationship. However, not everybody is ready, or not everybody is in a space where they're ready to engage or put the work in. So it's a very conscious and intentional choice when you say, I am ready to take the next step with this person. And in order to really share the best parts of yourself with someone, or make the determination that maybe the relationship is not the best in this moment or for you, we have to be realistic with ourselves. It's like putting the circle in the triangle hole. It just doesn't go. So, just to recap, we've been armed with the tools to build, rise, and thrive in how we truly connect with those around us as we continue on this journey of life. The 5 elements of how to transform your relationships with those around you are really identifying the components of how you define relationships. It's really going to be identifying, some of the high points and your keys for what your relationship will look like improved moving forward, because that's going to be your pathway. The next piece of this is really identifying how you two connect. And following that, it's being realistic about your strengths and your weaknesses. I want to, and the last part of this is going to be thriving in your relationship, which is the greatest space to be in. With that simply being you maintaining the journey of really pulling all of these pieces together, and being able to communicate. Now, I want to take a second to go back to discussing attachment and um, your strengths and your weaknesses. When I talk about connection, it really speaks to being able to make sure that you and whomever you're working on the relationship with are comfortable and in a safe space to do so. Conversations and dialogue cannot happen if we don't feel safe to continue a conversation or let our guard down. And that happens with trust. So if trust is not there, and the element of trust is nowhere to be found in this relationship, then start there. Start with trust. Because there will be that gold nugget of really starting to tease out how we have conversation. So just, I want to kind of circle back because we are starting to close out. And if you guys notice, the show's, just I want to make sure that I'm answering you guys' questions. And as we go into next week, we're still mapping greatness here, but we're really going to touch on an email that I received from a amazing listener who is having a challenge with making a very difficult decision. So I can't wait for you guys to tune in next week as well. But just to circle back, I want to identify the components of working toward a thriving relationship with anyone. And those components are defining your relationship, identifying your path forward, understanding your connection, identifying your strengths and weaknesses, and ultimately thriving in the relationship you're in. As we begin to come down from Cloud Thrive and champion through the rest of the week, I want you guys to remember to build strong, rise with intention, and thrive with courage and confidence to be the change you want to see. Again, this cloud is big enough for all of us, and